Alright, welcome back to another video on this whole RPG template that I created for our Esports Players Club development team. Just in case you were in the last video where I talked all about the abilities, one of the reasons why the abilities weren't loading is simply because when I was explaining it to you all, I put a dash here on accident. Not sure how that happened, but I was explaining the raycasting system in the last video. Just wanted to go ahead and show you all real quick the example again. For some reason when I was explaining it, I put a minus sign there, and I guess the fetch origin didn't reset it for whatever reason, but I don't really care why. But anyways, as you can see, when I click C here, I get the successful purchase there, and if I click E, it's not actually based on my C frame, it's based on my mouse position again. So I click E, dagger goes that way, click E, the dagger goes that way. So if you were playing with your friends and you turn around and try to throw the dagger, you could like hit them. Right, and you can also do this with shift lock pretty well. The only downside to this is that people can turn around like this. Ah, I made them fall. Come back, chase me. Ah, see. Ah. Right, the only downside is you can't do things like that and then run off the edge of the map because I'm so good at my own game. Right, but that's the one downside to kind of like some of the Roblox stuff. And you know, you can configure this by making it first person, which automatically puts shift lock on, but that's the only downside to the projectile system and how it's configured right now, is that you can throw things like back behind you. All right, but anyways, we're not talking about the ability system right now. We're tuned in here to talk about the character manager and how the base client abilities like the backflip and the double jump were configured to run. So let's go ahead and look here. This one shouldn't be too bad. But essentially the way this works is you have a client here and you have a client controller, and in here you have a nice little ability controller script, which is listed right here. So here's your ability controller. Excuse me, we don't want this one. We have a context action service controller. My bad. So that's your context action service. And right now there's only two base abilities. You can configure as many as you want, but these are the two base ones that I had. With that being said, I decided to do like a lot of the debounce stuff for this specific stuff on the client because it would be really hard to manipulate that a lot. And not only that, just you can kind of double jump a bunch. It doesn't really matter too much. And I decided to configure this on the client as well because I didn't want the server to be pinged too much or have to process too much of this information, because obviously the more your server has to process, the more laggy your game's going to be. So I tried to create like an even balance between what the server was going to process, and especially since it's pinging a data store, I didn't want it to, you know, get overloaded with requests or, you know, make things expensive for the server to host the game. So that's why I configured some of the debounce stuff on the client instead of the server. But I digress. Moving back into this, this grabs the character manager service. So the service is the service or the server controller. The server controller for the character manager is right here. And I'll talk about that in a second, but these are the two things. And if you look here, the very first thing that's happened is we have the start method. The start is kind of like a magic method in this framework that I used, where it only runs when the game is started, which is great. Very similar to Unity's awake, I think it is. But yeah, that's what that is. And here we declare our local variables. So getting the character manager service, context action service, user input service, all that good stuff. Then we'll scroll down to here. And as you can see, this is what's going to go ahead and call the methods to get binded here. When the humanoid dies, it's going to unbind some stuff, and then when the player is moved, it's going to unbind as well. That's your standard garbage collection when it comes to context action service, because we don't need to have all of this stuff binded if the player / character is being removed, or if the humanoid dies. They can't backflip if they're dead, right? Okay. Going back through here, looking through here. This stuff is also only going to be binded when the player enters, right? So we don't want to bind the stuff if there's no players in the game, or if there's only one player in the game, we don't want to bind it like 12 times, right? And we also only want to bind it when the player .character is added, because I find that if you don't bind context action service to this event, meaning you don't start doing your binds when this event happens, you'll get a lot of errors, because for whatever reason, Roblox is going to look for a humanoid underneath the character instance, but the character instance doesn't exist yet, so you'll get a whole bunch of issues with that. So it's better just to do a player.character added connect function and then pass character as a parameter, and then you're able to get everything going, and it's only going to run this code when the character is officially in the game and in the workspace. And that's great. So that's that right there. You get the humanoid, get the right hand. It's going to go ahead and configure your walk speed and stuff like that here. This is all given to you. Keep in mind that the starter walk speed and everything like this is essentially already configured by the weapon controller. So that's how I make sure that the context action service doesn't set the walk speed to something different than what the weapon speed should be. Then we're going to go ahead and go through here. Here is again your context action service binding. So here this creates a button for mobile. This is the key binding for the computer, which is control, and then B for the controller, the Xbox controller. Okay, and this is going to go ahead and bind all that stuff. Then we have our function here, which is backflip. You have your input here. This is your cooldown, making sure that the backflip cooldown is good. And then all your configs, I believe, are on the server. The only thing that's configured here is going to be debounce. So here's your debounce stuff is declared here. Action name is there, which is passed right here. And then the input, we want to make sure that the person is clicking control or is just click control. We don't want the person to backflip if they're not clicking control. Okay, then it's going to go ahead and look for the right hand, and it's going to get the children. If it has children and they are tagged as a game item, then we're going to go ahead and run the following stuff here. We're going to go ahead and get the game item's name. Then we're going to go ahead and get the config file here and set the start walk speed and the humanoid's walk speed to that. I was having some errors with callback because what happens is whenever you animate, something kind of strange happens with your humanoid object, where like your walk speed goes into this like weird state of like you don't really have one, and then it resets back to the default game walk speed. So let me go ahead and show you an example. And this was super weird. I figured this out. I actually had no idea this even happened until I did this template. But currently right now my walk speed is set to the game walk speed, which is 16. Okay, then when I equip, let's say the dagger, for example, okay, my walk speed changes. My walk speed is going to change to whatever the dagger config is, which is 25. And as you can see, I'm way faster. Then what happens is when you roll, watch what happens to this walk speed. What actually, and it's kind of weird that it's not doing this, but you would actually see this happen. What happens is although this didn't change, it actually goes to nil for half a second. I'm actually surprised it didn't change. But it was changing when I did this experiment without the code being the way it is. This actually does change for like a microsecond, although you can't see it for whatever reason. You see it when I slash, but that's because I set it to 0, then back to 25. But when you roll here, for example, you know, you want your walk speed and your jump height when you're rolling to be 0, because you don't want to like be able to run forward and go backwards at the same time. That doesn't make sense, right? So what happens is the walk speed gets set to 0 here. Then when you load this instance here, it like resets the walk speed and then sets it back to the game walk speed. It was super, super weird how that was happening. But this is why I had to call this information rather than using just this, because theoretically there's an item here and the character's walk speed changes, right, to 25. When the ability is called and we look for the start walk speed, it should store this as the start walk speed, and I shouldn't have to grab this information. But for some reason I did, for the exact reason that I just showed you. Essentially that when you call this stuff, it doesn't like save this information, which is super weird. So you have to just grab it from the config file again, which isn't really a big deal, but it was just something to keep in mind. Okay, then you're going to go and have your last backflick tick here. You're going to have your animation ID. You're going to have your load animation, and then this is what's going to call to the server. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the server here for the character manager service. So here's your character manager service. Here's your server side code. Again, this is going to pass player, the walk speed, and the jump height. Something to think about, and again, I hate sounding like a broken record here, but please, can somebody make it so that I have to type in player here so I can keep track of stuff? I hate that about Roblox. I feel like this 10th time I said that. But now, here's your local character. This is going to get your humanoid. This is going to get a force field. This is going to parent the force field to the character. So the reason why I did this is because I wanted there to be a slight instance where you weren't able to be damaged by anybody or anything in the game for a half a second. And I think this was really, really important to add because it kind of adds some variability in the game. It makes the game a little fun to play. So, but yeah, that's kind of the idea there. But anyways, here is the walk speed, jump power, and jump height being set to 0. Then this is going to go ahead and configure the ability to roll backwards. This is your backflip.backforce.parent. It's going to be parented the primary part. Attached to this, it's going to be enabled with a max force. And then your line direction, or where you're going to roll, is the opposite direction of where you are looking. And then the config file is just a small little dictionary here. But you get your invincibility period here, your debreeze time, which is how long you are getting pushed backwards, and then this is the force in which you are pushed backwards. And then that's all added right here. So that's all of that. And then here's your debreeze timer for the force, and then here's your debreeze timer for the backflip force field. So this is your invincibility timer, and then this is your force debreeze timer. And this garbage collects the linear force to make sure that, you know, it's not just chilling in the game, constantly pushing you backwards. Then this resets your walk speed and stuff back to what it was, right? And that's super important. And again, I'm not sure why Roblox like can't pass, or like whatever happens to this humanoid object here when you roll, that it like sets your walk speed into this weirdly nil, like weird place. But it does. I definitely know it does. And that's why I had to pass this information here from the weapon config, because I was having such issues there. But yeah, that's how the backflip was created. And the animation also, I believe, is loaded on the client. I think I showed you guys the animation, but the animation is loaded on the client, and it should be loaded right here. Right there. And then tick is your cooldown stuff. Okay? So yeah, that's that, and that's the backflip. So then the next thing that was kind of like a base action that the player could do was double jump. So double jump was a little tricky because in order to double jump, you had to first make sure that the character had already jumped. Now, you could do a debounce timer on the space bar, but what happens is you click space and then you click space again. You have two instances of you clicking the space bar, and it was very hard to do it via debounce. So I decided to do it via states. So states are different like states that your humanoid object is in. So essentially your humanoid is here, and it can have many different like states that it's in, right? So, and you'll have a status right here, but essentially you have like things like a free fall. You can be in like a free fall state, you can be in a jumping state, and you can actually see them even check here, or they were. For a split second there, you can see it checking here. Right, you can also have like a run state. There's a dead state, there's an alive state, there's a whole bunch of states, and I think I can even pull them up here in a second. But anyways, I decided to do it via states. And the problem with doing it via states is that you couldn't bind it to a context action service. And the reason why you couldn't bind it to context action service is because you didn't want the bind to happen, because what happens is you would pass input then, and it would bind, but it wouldn't do the action, it would just bind, right? So I decided to use user input service instead, because I was having a lot of glitches with context action service, and just take my word for it, it wasn't working really well for this double jump. So what I decided to do is we're just going to go ahead and use user input service to detect any input from the user. So you get input from the user at all whatsoever, it's detected via user input service. Then we're going to make sure that the input coming from the user was either a spacebar click, was either a button A on controller, or was the jump button on mobile. So those are those three checks. Then you have your tick here checking debounce. So this is your debounce to make sure that this isn't being, spammed like this. All right, so this way, if that's not there, I don't even think I can show an example of this. If this isn't there, I think I just float in the sky. I should just be able to float. Let me go ahead and play and show you all. But while that's unloading, here we go. but if that's not there, you'll float. But then after that's done, this is what I meant by it's state-based. We're essentially going to make sure that the humanoid state is in free fall. Because if it's in free fall, then we know that the character had to have jumped or the character is falling. And that's really only how you should have a double jump, is if you've either jumped or you're like falling after a jump, right? And in order to be doing that, you have to be in this state known as free fall. And it's interesting that it's not jump, because there is a humanoid.state type and it's like .jump or jumping, and I was having a lot of glitches with that, so I decided to do free fall instead because that seemed to be a lot cleaner and a lot smoother. But first things first, I went ahead and got rid of the debounce here so you guys can see. So I think if I spam the spacebar here, no, I think the debounce must be being configured somewhere else too. But this is another checker for the debounce, I think. I wonder why the debounce. It must be being called in the server too, and I just forgot about it, but that's okay. Sorry guys. But anyways, this is then gonna do, this is the state base that I was talking about. This checks the state of the humanoid to make sure that it's in a free fall state. Okay, then this right here ticks, so this tracks the last time that the double jump was called. This is gonna load your animation, play it, and then we're gonna go ahead and go to the server, which I do think has a debounce system in place. So let's go through here. So here is your backflip, and then here is your server. So here's the server. The server is then just going to get the player and character and add a linear velocity to you going up, and add a debris timer as well to make sure that you're not just constantly spamming everything. And yeah, I already explained this linear force, but linear force essentially is an object in Roblox which adds a linear velocity, excuse me, linear velocity, not linear force, but adds a linear velocity to a specific part. That part is, that linear velocity is attached to the part via an attachment, and you can configure the direction and the velocity here. And then debris is your garbage collector. But yeah, this is the server versus client stuff and the communication. It's all configured right here. So yeah, and those are essentially the two base like movement mechanics in the game / abilities that you can do, and you know, it's pretty fun to work with. And it's pretty good. So go ahead, we can just watch a little bit of it in action here. Watch me die to these mobs again. Let's see. I'm a fire sword guy. I don't know about y'all. Where's the fire sword? I like the fire sword a lot. It's a dagger. Oh, we're just gonna use the ultimate sword, the OP sword. But as you can see, you know, and then if I roll here, whoops, my bad, meant to roll. Here we go. So they spawn on me, and right as they're about to hit me here, I can get a little bit of invincibility here if I can time it right. Oh no, I didn't mean to spawn y'all. Go away. Go away. No. Huh. Oh, he got me. There we go. Whoa. Alright, but as you can see, you can even see that little force field there pop up, kind of denoting that you are in roll, and then here's your double bump. So yeah, that's the base abilities that the character can do, and just a little bit of combat shown in action there before I died instantly. And yeah, I hope that was super helpful. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you all in the next one.